Hi, class. Welcome to week 6 called Engaging with the Community on Human Rights. That's also the name of our chapter from my book, Human Rights Policing Reimagining Law Enforcement in the 21st Century. And so our readings are going to focus on specifically that chapter where we talk about soulful policing as the introduction, and there I get a little bit artistic and creative with that introduction as I begin to talk about how human rights policing requires a type of a soulful policing, and I discuss what I mean by that uh, in that introduction. Then I introduce you to 1920 Chicago School sociology. I call it Getting Dirty. It was really one of the heydays, I think, of sociology in the United States. There's two heydays of sociology in the United States. I think the first one would be the 1920s school, where I talk about the great work of the women of the Hull House in Chicago, and then a little bit later, the famous Chicago school theorists, where the professors would tell the students, do you want to, if you want to learn about social life, what are you doing in the classroom? What are you doing to simply reading books? You need to go out into the community. You need to go out into the corner stores. You need to go out into the bars. You need to go out into the brothels. You need to go out to the churches and to the community organizations and to the boxing rings. You need to go into the inner city and get the seat of your pants dirty and explore social life firsthand, building rapport with people, getting to know the people that you want to understand by spending a lot of time with them, by immersing your entire life into their world and developing relationships to them. So if you want to understand gang members, then become not necessarily become part of the gang, but become friends with the gang members. Spend a lot of time with gang members. Go to their churches, go to their colleges, go to their neighborhoods, go to their community events, um, and immerse yourself into their world. In other words, if we want to understand people, if we want to use that sociological imagination, where we not only understand the objective conditions that that people face in the world, we also have to understand their subjective experiences and how they give meaning to their own subjective experiences, all while understanding the objective conditions which created those subjective experiences. And so, if we want to develop that sense of empathy, that verstehen that we've talked about, where we can see the world from the actor's point of view, where we can see and experience to the best of our abilities their emotions, their joys, their sorrows, their beliefs, their triumphs, their failures, their insecurities. We need to immerse ourselves into those worlds and become part of that world for an extended amount of of time and share our vulnerabilities as well, our insecurities, our joys, our sufferings. In other words, develop egalitarian relationships with the people that we understand by going into their communities and immersing ourselves into their lives. And so I talk about this as being important to soulful policing, and I use what I think was some of the best sociology ever in the 1920s Chicago sociology. Of course, the second heyday of sociology with the 1960s. But anyhow, and so according to that 1920s sociology, I give some examples in that chapter based on my first book, which was actually part of my original dissertation, which was on Afro-Caribbean Pentecostal tongue speakers in Brooklyn. And so I have a title chapter, um, tongue speakers and religious fanatics in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is where I did my doctoral work. And I ended up publishing, separate from my dissertation, I ended up publishing my first book, Getting the Holy Ghost, Pentecostal tongue speakers, Afro-Caribbean neighborhood in Brooklyn. And so I talk about like how I came in with preconceived notions of, Pentecostals, of religion, of tongue speaking. And once I became immersed into their world and I developed relationships and built rapport with people in that community, how all of my prejudices and all of my notions and stereotypes and thoughts about this community begin to just fade away as I immersed myself into their world. Um, I also did this with one of my more recent books, Down and Out in New Orleans, Transgressive Living on the Urban Fringes of New Orleans, um, where I spent time living down and nearly out in New Orleans for months. Part of this experience was not only working odd jobs and working as a bartender on Bourbon Street in Vieux the French Quarter, and I was a clown uh, stomping on glass on the streets. I was a busker on the streets as well, typing poetry for tourists. I did all kinds of different uh, types of jobs in New Orleans, but part of that was also squatting illegally and criminally in vacant housings, and I've learned how to do that. And I've wrote a whole chapter on how to squat in vacant, abandoned houses and how to get away with it, how to avoid detection from the police, uh, things of that nature. But I also wrote about what it's like living homeless in New Orleans, which I did, not only squatting in vacant housings and staying some time in some of the tent cities, but I also stayed in homeless shelters as well to document the experiences of what it's like to be homeless. And of course, a lot of my preconceived notions there began to evaporate as well the more I immersed myself into the world of homeless people in New Orleans. And one of the questions that I was wondering is why uh, people decided to sleep on the streets and in these urban kind of encampments and not sleep in homeless shelters. And certainly I discovered that quickly. I was reminded of Orwell, who once said that as soon as your income drops below a certain level, people feel that they have a right to preach over you. And that's certainly true. The moment that my income was perceived to be below a certain level, people were all of a sudden condescending and felt the right to preach over someone like me. They wouldn't have done that if they knew how much money I have or that I was a professor or anything like that. Um, and so, uh, so I think you'll find that an entertaining read. You can also check out my book in a library, so you don't have to pay for it. Down and Out in New Orleans: Transgressive Living in the Urban Economy. Um, it's available at UWL Library. Then my father wrote a bit from his experiences working in the prostitution division in the New Orleans Police Department, and so he has a section called Sex Workers, Policing, and City Life, Getting to Know Community Members. And this was he'll talk about his first experiences working as an undercover agent in the prostitution division. And he'll talk about some of his first encounters acting as a John, where he solicited um, as an undercover agent sex for a price. And so fascinating read there from my father. Then the other two sections where my father was assigned to be the community liaison for the gay business community, largely in the French Quarter of New Orleans, when he served as the commander of the police district in the French Quarter, the Vieux. And so my father talks about his experiences with the gay business community of the New Orleans French Quarter and how this led to one of him becoming best friends with Phil, the maitre d'. So I think you'll like that. And then I have one more section where police officers that I know were able to contribute a little bit of their experiences engaging with members of the Committee on Human Rights. So I think that you'll enjoy that. So make sure you give that a read. Then your discussion board is really on this whole idea of community organizations. So I've immersed myself into various communities in order to learn more about people. When I teach my human rights policing class to police officers, not undergrads, but to police officers, so they get actually certified in human rights policing. That's right. I mean, actually, the police who take my class get certified in human rights policing. So I've certified police officers throughout the United States in human rights, and I plan on continuing to do more of that. And so I asked them to go into the community and to learn more about how people want to be policed, especially as it applies to human rights. And so, obviously, as you know, that's part of your class community engaged projects. And so, really, your discussion board is meant to facilitate your class project. And here I give you a discussion board asking you to talk with a community organization on human rights. And I give you very specific instructions and certain questions to ask in your response. And so y'all have been doing a great job with your discussion boards. So just keep that up. Next week, you're going to have the human rights midterm or human rights policing midterm report. That's largely based upon updates on your progress so far in your community engaged projects. So I'll ask you things like to discuss the community organization, who are they, who are their voices, to discuss your strategy for gaining access, provide an example of an interview outline, et cetera, et cetera. And so then I'll have a few other questions that are related to things that we've discussed in class. I'll open up, you have until March 10th to complete that final as it's indicated on your on Canvas and on the syllabus. But I'm probably going to open it up early for you, maybe by Thursday or Friday, so you'll have even more time to complete the project. Um, okay, I think that's pretty much it. So you'll have the midterm progress report. Then after that, you'll have spring break. That's week 8, so no class for spring break, no online class, and we'll come back week 9, and we'll finish our book where I talk about policy suggestions, human rights, and the future of policing. And so again, it's very important to read. I don't give you all too much to read, so it's very important to read everything um, assigned in those chapters. Other than that, I'm going to hold. Um, Let me know if you want to meet with me for anything. Just send an email. We can meet virtually, whatever you prefer. And so keep up the solid effort. Y'all are doing a great job, and I certainly appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing y'all in the discussion board. Thank you very much.